Well, I think it's important because reproductive justice is a pretty big word. It's a pretty broad term, and so it certainly encompasses issues that are like directly relevant to the lives of GLBT people. But I think that there's the beauty of reproductive justice is that it is so big, and so that means fighting for reproductive justice for everyone, and in doing that you fight it for yourself as well. And so yeah, kind of there's some direct issues, and then there's this kind of spirit of it, working for other people, and that's why I think that queer people should definitely be and are in the movement.
Why do you think that people have been left out of these narratives, like people from the GLBT or queer communities?
I think that, I mean, it's important to remember that there's a difference between sort of the pro-choice movement and some feminist movements, and then the reproductive justice movement, and there's tons of overlap. But, I mean, reproductive justice marks a shift that I think begins to include GLBT voices, LGBTQ voices, and I think that historically you'll see, especially if you look at the feminist movement, all the way into the 80s, there was still continually conflict in feminist circles of including like even lesbian voices, and then bisexual women's voices and things like that. And we certainly aren't going to listen to gay men, right? Because that's just sort of this fear of feminism being tainted by lesbianism. Does that make sense? Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you do. So I think that fear is always kind of lurking behind, and the right is there's narratives to the right that come in too and say, oh, you all are a bunch of lesbian feminists, and there's nothing worse to be called than that, right? And so there's sometimes people do work to kind of counter those stories, like no, we're focused on this issue and this issue only. And I mean, I do think things are changing though. I think that those voices, other stories are being included. I think that there are a number of things. And first of all, like at Carbon Bill, for example, with some of the reproductive justice activities that are going on, there's a lot of like GLBTQ folks who are involved and like heavily involved. So escorting at a local clinic, and some days, most days, when you look at the group that's coming to Carbon Bill, 4 out of 5 of them are GLBTQ. And so sometimes we're like, I mean, we don't want to make any assumptions, but we're scratching our heads going, okay, this seems like this might be, linked to a broader trend. Like, I feel like we're giving a lot, and this isn't necessarily our issue. I mean, it is our issue, but at face value, you could look at it and say, this is not our issue. Why are we getting involved? So I think that's important. You have to have GLBTQ involvement in issues that don't seem like they're ours. Recognizing that in a broader way they absolutely are. And then that visibility, I think, is important. So talking about it, like what you're doing right now, is a good thing. Talking about it, recognizing contributions that are made, and then also asking allies to step in. So allies that we meet, for example, in the course of our other work. Hey, why don't you come to this thing that we're doing? Why don't you come help us out National Day of Silence or something like that? Whether you're talking about, the rights for two parents to get married, I mean, that's a reproductive justice issue. If you're talking about the rights of two parents to adopt, or one parent to adopt, regardless of gender, that's a reproductive justice issue. When you're talking about the rights of, looking at sterilization in the South, in North Carolina, for example, that's a reproductive justice issue when women are being sterilized. You're looking at individuals with disabilities who have been forcibly sterilized. That's a reproductive justice issue. And so the fact that we do have queers on all these fronts working, I think that shows the connection. I mean, the connections are there. The problem is that those connections are not always made visible. So whenever we say reproductive justice, I mean, that's a newer term. That's like only been on the, the tips of people's tongues. Some people don't even know about it. And maybe in the last 10 years, maybe our feminist circles saying these words. The connections are there. I mean, what you're looking at are taking the state and particular parties trying to take control of our bodies and make decisions for us about our bodies. And that's based on sexual orientation. Sometimes it's based on race, it's based on class, it's based on disability. It's all connected. But we're not necessarily seeing that. People are not always understanding those connections. And so, I mean, I think it's a good question of like, how do we illuminate, cast a light and show how it's all systematic, how it's all connected, just in the same ways that, say, racism, sexism, and homophobia are connected. I mean, we see this theoretically, but how to practically, show people that. Yeah, I mean, it shrinks reproductive justice. I mean, it doesn't do the issue justice to show, I mean, we need to see pockets. It's more than okay to take a book and focus on a very, select group of issues. But yeah, we need a broader amount of literature out there, and I do think queer voices should be heard. Sometimes though, people don't think about GLBTQ issues as reproductive justice issues, and that might be part of it. We tend to think of, I mean, if you think about this push for marriage, I mean, this is a kind of more recent push, and we haven't always in the past thought of GLBTQ people as having families, as needing to adopt or wanting to adopt. We haven't thought about their needs for marriage necessarily. It's kind of new territory for us to be talking about marriage or any of these kinds of issues. So yeah, it's reframing things a little bit, and also recognizing that the GLBTQ communities are pretty diverse, and so just because you are, you don't necessarily want to adopt, or you don't want to do this or that, like you need to have the right to do that, and that's directly tied to this broader matrix of oppression. So those voices do need to be heard, and letting both. So basically including GLBTQ voices who are impacted by having the reproductive justice limited, letting those voices be heard. Acknowledging those people within the movement, which is being done, but then being acknowledged within the GLBTQ movement, and then acknowledging them within the reproductive justice movement. Because you got a lot of movements going on, obviously.
So you mentioned the escorting that you do at Hope Clinic. Could you tell me a little bit more about that, and maybe some of the other things that you have been involved in for reproductive justice in this area?
Sure. So I've been involved with the Women's Center since 2001. I think that's really important for women to be able to make decisions free of fear from violence, free of fear from being economically controlled, things like that. I've also been involved with NARAL, pro-choice. I've been involved with them for a few years. I think I did like 2 or 3 years. Monthly, we go up to Hope Clinic, which is one of the worst clinics actually for protesting, because they are the way the property sits. They're not allowed. They can't gate off the property, and so it's just open. And there's a limited amount of parking, so that means that oftentimes clients have to walk through throngs, and sometimes there's 15 protesters, and that's a good day. And then sometimes there's 250. And you never know when a lot of local church groups in Southern Illinois, in fact, far more people committed to anti-choice stuff drive up than committed to reproductive rights. So in some ways it's sad to see them a little more committed.